Hi, it's Peter Schweizer, and welcome to the Drill Down. Well, you're hearing about tariffs, trade wars, stock markets in turmoil. What exactly is going on? Joining me today is 𝐃𝐫𝐤𝒥. We're going to unpack it for you. We are not financial advisors, so don't look for us in that regard. But I will say we've studied a lot of what happens in economic decision-making, and there are a lot of interesting aspects to what's happening right now that people probably aren't aware of.
No, I think that's right. This should be an illuminating discussion. And obviously, we're in the middle of this big story, just like everyone else. Last week, you had a Diet Coke to open the episode. This week, you do not, because you can no longer afford one. But I would like to say, if there are any pharmaceutical companies that want to advertise on the podcast, now is the time. We need the money. Oh, my goodness. It has been a tumultuous last couple of days and a costly one to stock markets and the portfolios for many people, including many people that are listening to this podcast. But what we want to do is put what's happening as a reaction to the tariffs and what the Trump administration's policies seem to be in a much larger picture. Yeah, if you look at what the media is reporting, they're creating this sort of panic scenario. We've now started a trade war. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be, huge financial problems coming forward. And that's not really the reality. We're going to unpack several facets of what is occurring. This is not just about tariffs. It's part of, I think, a larger effort that Trump is engaging in that has to do with our national debt. It has to do with consumer debt. It has to deal with the geostrategic position. And of course, it does have to do with trade. But I have to say, the thing that kind of surprises me up front about all of this is what Trump is doing is creating reciprocal tariffs that are basically half of what these countries have on the United States. And what's funny to me is, so they've already engaged in this behavior. We're now catching up and doing it partly back to them. That apparently constitutes a trade war. The fact that they were doing it to us for decades and we weren't responding was fine. But now that we have responded, we have this sort of chaotic situation. And by the way, this is not a new debate. This has been kind of an ongoing conversation with our national leaders on both sides of the aisle with regards to tariffs and some of those practices. Here's a video clip of just an example of some voices in the past. You're going to hear Barack Obama. You're going to hear Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders. And of course, you're going to hear Donald Trump talking decades ago about this very problem.
We had a tire case in which they were flooding us with cheap domestic tires or cheap Chinese tires. And we put a stop to it.
I believe in trade, but I believe in fair trade, not unfettered free trade. I do not believe that we should be shutting down factories in America and having corporations run to desperate countries where people are paid $1 or $2 an hour. I don't believe in that. The function of trade is not just to make large corporations wealthier.
Tariffs?
When tariffs are necessary, absolutely.
It's also proper for advanced economies like the United States to insist on reciprocity from nations like China that are no longer solely poor countries, to make sure that they're providing access to their markets.
The average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? The fact is that U.S.-China trade is a job loser.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, health care, pensions, throw them out on the street, because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants, we move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country.
Look, I think the president's doing the right thing. China has been taking advantage of us for two decades. They're stealing our intellectual property, which means stealing our good-paying jobs. And I, frankly, am closer on this issue, not on many, but on this issue with President Trump than I was with Presidents Bush or Obama, because they did nothing to tell China off. Now, China, of course, will respond. But if they know we're strong and we're not going to back off, they will back off. They have far more to lose than we do. They have a $300 billion trade surplus with us. So I'm looking out, number one, for jobs. You know, if General Electric moves jobs to China, they're not unhappy, but my New York workers in Schenectady are unhappy. And so you can't let the international business companies who don't give a hoot about where their factories are govern this. You have to do what's good for the American worker.
Last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
Yeah, so you heard the R word there from Democrats. You heard Donald Trump talking decades ago about this issue. My question for you, Eric, is why do you think there's been this switch? Why is it that Democrats that used to talk about trade issues in this way seem to be less inclined? Is this just they don't like Trump, or something larger going on?
Well, it's a good question. I think there seem to be critiques about the Trump administration's policies in a couple different respects. One is the way this policy was announced with the chart, and they said that the reciprocity formula ended up maybe not being exactly what they said it would be. And so people are like, look, if you want to do this, then don't roll it out in a manner in which some people, even on the right, have said is unserious. But on the other hand, I mean, look, we are the Government Accountability Institute. What we do is talk about the relationship between big business and big government. And it's clear, based on the reaction of the stock market, that these policies are not good for big businesses that rely on cheap labor overseas, and then they come back and they sell it here. It's been great for the stock market, but I think that's the point. I mean, that Joe Biden lost the last election, I guess, and Kamala Harris, because essentially the American people didn't buy their argument that the economy was great, even though the market was up over 40,000, right, in the Dow. And people said, hey, that's cool, but like everything's more expensive. And so here comes the Trump administration saying, all right, well, we're going to fundamentally change that. And everybody's like, well, wait a minute now. Where'd that come from?
No, that's a great point. I think one of the reasons you're seeing this switch, by the way, is that the Democrats used to be the party that sort of Wall Street, I'm going back to the 80s and even part of the 90s, Wall Street didn't really like the Democrats. A lot of big corporations didn't like the Democrats. They tended to skew Republican. That is now reversed. It's now Wall Street, the big financiers on Wall Street, the big corporations tend to be in Democratic hands. So that's where the money is coming from the Democrats. But I think to your point about the economy, an amazing statistic on government spending. People that are supportive of the Biden administration, Democrats, will say, oh, the economy was great during the Biden years. The fact of the matter is the economy was inflated because we were spending money like drunken sailors. And that's kind of insulting to drunken sailors because the amount of money we spent was so much. Spending from 2019, when COVID, right before COVID, the sort of normal year, you go to 2024, we were spending that year 50% more than we spent in 2019, and the population growth was 3%. So that is what stimulated this quote unquote growing economy, but it was all a facade, it was all fake, and now you've got to sort of deflate that balloon a little bit and put it in a positive direction. I think the trade strategy is part of that.
Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said that he compared it to a body that looks good because it's on steroids. So the muscles are big, but inside all the organs are failing because of the drugs that you're using to perpetuate this myth. And so to your point, and I mean, those numbers are staggering, right? 2019, 4.4 trillion is what the U.S. spent. By 2024, last year, the Biden administration, 6.8 trillion, which speaks to a couple of different things. Number one, I mean, COVID's over by this point for several years.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but like the criticism of government programs never go away, or the spending never goes down, even though all the COVID relief stuff. So the COVID relief stuff goes away. So then what is it? Well, it's green energy spending, and it's the investment, the Infrastructure Act, and all those things. And so, yeah, it's crazy, and the market's up. But if the mainstream media and their the big corporations are losing their mind over this, and it's a great point about, I think, big corporations and Wall Street is the party for Democrats now. Even Gavin Newsom's like on his podcast with Steve Bannon, he goes, how did you guys do this? How did the Republicans become the party of the working class? So the market's down, and that obviously impacts people with big portfolios. But guess who it's not really impacting right now? It's not impacting people who make less than $40,000 a year,
right,
of whom only 29% are invested in the market. It's not impacting young people, right, of whom 59% don't own stocks. And it's not impacting, people without a college degree, of whom 56% don't own stocks as well. What do, lower income workers, younger people, and people without a college degree have in common? That's the Trump voting coalition. And so that's Main Street. And you've heard that. This is Main Street's term. So what they're focused on is giving those people relief, not in terms of what's happening in the market, but in interest rates and in other costs that impact their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and of course, the fear that people have is that if things continue to cascade, people that aren't invested in the stock market, they may lose their jobs, capital may freeze up, there may be layoffs, et cetera. We'll see. But I think to your point, it's a very important one, is this is not simply just about the issue of trade. It's not just about the stock market, although that's where all the news is. This actually relates to the fact that we have this huge debt overhang, both in terms of, the general population is highly in debt, and the federal government. This year, we've got, several, I think, $1 trillion of debt we need to refinance. And if those interest rates are high, it's a lot more expensive. It means we're going to be spending billions and billions and billions of more dollars in interest payments than we would otherwise. So, Besant talked about this a little bit. We are looking for ways in which we can bring down the 10-year treasuries to a way that's more manageable, because that's what it's based on. The debt refinancing is based on, and that's part of what's going on here. It's not just about trade policy; it's trying to deal with this fiscal challenge as well.
Yeah, something like $9.2 trillion in debt matures this year in 2025, and so they're saying for every basis point. We don't want to get too technical, but Secretary Besant says, "Hey, that could save us $100 billion a year." The 10-year yield was up to 4.8 in January. It dropped below 4 Friday.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of is moving around there. So that's absolutely something that they're looking at. And then you've got like mortgage rates, which of course impact regular people. We saw an 11% increase in mortgage applications in March of last year. People are feeling a little bit more optimistic. Before that, in the last quarter of 2024, people were sounding alarms that the rate of delinquencies was raising. And so it's a lot of warning signs. And so they need to get those rates down. The mortgage rate for an average home was over 7% in January. It's now down to about 6.6. So, and as Secretary Besant said recently too, not just our interest rates coming down, the price of oil is down 15% in the last couple of weeks. So, how expensive is your mortgage, or if you're trying to buy a new home, how expensive is the gas pump? Those are the things they're focused on more than what's the Dow at right now.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And I think that that's an element that is being overlooked in a lot of the debate. There's a fiscal side to what is going on here with these tariffs. I think it also relates to another topic that's overlooked, and that is that, you have these trade imbalances, but part of the problem, and Trump has talked about this, and so is his team, is the sort of things that we are importing in a large number. China, for example, is a great example of this. China, we have this massive dependence upon them for pharmaceuticals and basic things like medical supplies. And we know, going back to COVID in 2020, if you remember, China was sort of in the crosshairs because Trump was calling it, I think accurately, the China virus. China basically told Trump, look, if you keep doing this, we're just going to cut you off. We're not going to send you masks. We're not going to send you gowns. And I'm talking about the mask for medical personnel. I'm not talking about the silly cloth ones that people were wearing. I'm talking about those K95 masks or penicillin. We're not going to send you penicillin anymore. So part of the issue, I think, is not just the trade deficit or the trade imbalance. You were going to have imbalances with different countries. That's going to exist. It's the fact that they have a strategy to make us dependent upon the importation of certain goods. And if we're dependent upon them, they have leverage on us.
No, that's absolutely right. And to your point, given the fact that even though, we wanted to call it the China virus, we still have had this something that caused, it fundamentally upended Western society, and not just Western society, kind of global society. And we still haven't had hearings on, hey, where did this come from? It's still we think it's from the lab, but maybe it's not okay to say that, or maybe it is okay to say it now. And that speaks to the amount of leverage that China had, and they did in the interview that the Treasury Secretary did with Tucker Carlson. He said, "Look, we had basically a beta test for what a kinetic war looks like with China, and what we learned is we do not control our own supply chains on things. If we end up in a war with China, the fact that we don't manufacture the things that we need to function as a society, that's a major problem. And so, if the goal of these tariffs is to help increase U.S. production capacity, they basically said it's not even in a hostile way. They want to bring China to the table. They want China to consume more and produce less. They want us to produce more and have China consume less. That's one of the goals. But I think, the secretary made several key points. Listen to one of the points he made on Meet the Press just this last Sunday.
Kristen, what I like is data. And if we look at data from President Trump's first term, and there's a big study that just came out from a group of economists, mostly at MIT, that showed that a 20% tariff on China led to a 0.7% tax or price level increase over 4 years. I think that's pretty good. If we can take in 20% in tariffs and it's a 0.7% increase. And Kristen, the little publicized story this week, everyone wants to look at the stock market going down. You know what else went down? Oil prices went down almost 15% in 2 days, which impacts working Americans much more than the stock market does. Interest rates hit their low for the year, so I'm expecting the mortgage applications to pick up.
Well, just to be very clear, though, I mean, during President Trump's first terms, the cost to Americans was nearly $80 billion in new taxes due to his tariffs. The prices did go up on everything from washing machines to tires.
Well, no, but let's go back. The aggregate number was 0.7, so we can discern the individual things. Also, households saw real net wages go up. So if wages go up faster than prices, which is not what happened over the past 4 years, that's why the bottom 50% got eviscerated.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that yes, tariffs have the potential, theoretically, if they're on a massive scale, to cause inflation. But his point is that it really doesn't. If it's done in the right way, it doesn't have to have that effect. And I think the Trump record shows that. And certainly the Biden record shows that. We had massive inflation with Joe Biden, had nothing to do with tariffs. It had to do with this massive government spending of money.
Yeah, and I think largely everyone sort of recognized the economy last 4 years not good.
Yeah.
And everyone's losing their mind over the last couple of days of stocks. But the point is that Trump has been, and we've seen this happen through the first 3 months of his presidency, which is crazy to think he's only been president for
I'm kind of exhausted already.
Like less than 3 months. But he's clearly in the business of collecting leverage. And so what these announced tariffs mean or suggest is that he wants these to be leverage for, and a lot of people are going to say, like, we're going to see an increase in bilateral deals. We've even, I think just now it's breaking that Europe has said, look, we will come to the table. We would like these tariffs to be dropped. And so I think it's almost like we're having the wrong conversation. We talk about the impact of tariffs. That assumes that tariffs exist in perpetuity, which I don't believe they will. I believe that they are going to be a short-term measure to extract people to come to the table and negotiate deals, whether it's with Mexico and China on fentanyl trafficking or with Europe on, well, we want you to lower the cost for some of our product to make the market. I mean, things of that nature, and you're already sort of seeing that happen.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, leverage is the key word. And you're essentially talking about a couple of major offenders, right? He gave this list of all the countries that we are going to be putting tariffs on, including countries that I mean, I haven't heard of in years, Vanuatu and some of these other countries. But the major offenders are really China and Mexico. Canada is also in the top 10. I was surprised by that. These are where we have these trade imbalances. And you're going to have trade imbalances sometimes just because, somebody has a natural resource or somebody has a product that you want and you don't necessarily have something to offer them. But in these particular cases, it's because they have these massive trade barriers. China has them. Even Canada has them. We talked about this earlier. I mean, they have strict quotas on dairy products. So if we send them, a certain amount of milk, they jack up those prices on farmers in Minnesota. And,
over 200%.
Yeah, over 200%. Minnesota and Michigan farmers that are trying to sell their dairy products in Canada, good luck. And so leverage is the key. And the point is, they're going to keep tariffs on until an American president steps up and says, we've had enough. There's no reason for you to have these tariffs anymore. And we're going to come back with these reciprocal tariffs, which we've done. So now let's make a deal. So I think a lot of the turmoil we're seeing now is going to be short-lived. And I think we're going to see a lot of encouragement movement going forward. And we're going to actually go to what everybody says they wanted, which is a world with open, free, and fair trade. I think this is the best shot at moving in that direction.
And you pointed out, too, that, we think of Canada as like, oh, that Canada's acting like why would you come at us? And the analogy is like if you're a child and you're fighting, the person who throws the last punch is always the one that gets in trouble. And you say, why are you hitting Canada? Well, what we haven't seen is what Canada has had in place against us for some time. To your point, they're not a massive economy, yet they are ninth in terms of the trade imbalance, the trade deficit. We have, I think, a nearly $700 billion trade deficit with them, and including things like restrictions on banks, which you were on.
Yeah. So in the United States, you can go to TD Bank, which is Toronto Dominion Bank, and they can operate in the United States pretty unfettered. Very difficult for American banks to operate in Canada. You have to have a Canadian middleman. You have to find a Canadian partner. You have to get special sanction from the Canadian government to operate. I know the American wine industry has tariffs and challenges to getting into the Canadian market. I know the stereotype is Canadians only drink beer, but I think they actually do drink wine as well. And with these tariffs...
Well, with that weather, you'd have to. Come on.
So, look, the bottom line is the media coverage has been terrible on this because these are reciprocal. They are important. And the goal here, I think, that Trump has is moving in a direction where you are protecting certain critical industries in the United States. And at the same time, you are removing trade barriers for the United States to export our products overseas. And who's not in favor of that? The problem is if you rely on the goodwill even of our friends and the Canadians to do it, they're not going to do it until you press them to do it.
Yeah, by the way, a shocking country in the top 10 list of trade offenders here. I mean, China you get, Mexico you get, Vietnam you get. How about Ireland? Ireland in the top 5.
Oh, the Irish.
No wonder they're so nice to us when we go over there. You thought it was just this Irish spirit. No, it's because they're robbing us blind, pint after pint of Guinness. It's crazy.
So, I mean, what is it? Is it Irish whiskey? I'm just trying to think. I'm not demeaning Ireland, but that's a massive number.
I don't know. You can talk to your buddy Seamus O'Houlihan about that. But he's clearly doing quite well. By the way, on the other end of the spectrum, the countries that we actually have a positive trade relationship with, the United Kingdom. So we have that special relationship with them. The country that actually we have the most healthy or in our favor relationship with, the Netherlands.
Oh, interesting.
I know. We have $113 billion surplus in terms of trade with the Netherlands or Holland. Hong Kong's positive, Australia and the United Arab Emirates are in the top 5. So interesting. Yeah, but I actually think that's part of the genius of what Trump is doing here is, again, we're having even a conversation about trade imbalances, not, just like we're now having a conversation about wasteful spending in government. And they all kind of have the same goal of getting the United States' fiscal health in order.
Yeah.
It's all part of the same strategy. So they're trying to lower the Treasury yield interest rates so that our payments on debt cost us less. They think they can save hundreds of billions of dollars that way. They're lowering government spending. With these tariffs, I think they can bring in another $600 billion, depending upon how long some of these things stay in. So it all has to do with, look, we've got a massive debt in this country, and this is how you take care of it.
Yeah, exactly right. You're not going to talk about it. People have talked for years about cutting government spending, about trade deals. We heard the video montage earlier. The bottom line is Trump is trying to do that, and it's a heavy lift. I mean, you're going to get squealing, you're going to get opposition, but people are coming to the table because, as you said earlier, as we were talking about that, The most powerful asset we have is access to our market. People want to sell in the United States because we are spenders. We have a consumer market that is unmatched, and we need to use that in a positive way to make sure that our goods are able to get into these foreign markets.
Axios wrote in a column that Donald Trump was like a real estate mogul who had a list of mansions that he was just looking to unload. He's looking to kind of cut a deal.
Right.
I think you would say that like his mansion is the American consumer, because he knows that the American consumer is one of the most valuable assets in the global economy, and he thinks it's been underutilized and underappreciated abroad, and he's kind of standing on business, as it were, and he's standing up for us, and I think he's trying to fundamentally change things, and he thinks the math should work in our favor, and we'll see. By the way, the next thing that he's going to do that everyone's going to lose their mind over is his budget, which is going to include some tax cuts.
Yeah.
And that's his effort. Said, okay, things are going to cost more maybe now in the short term because of these tariffs, but if we give you more relief with these tax cuts, like that's all, I think the other part of this, the other leg on the stool, but of course that's also not going to be presented in that context. It's going to be, oh my gosh, this is the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it's amazing. We think of clickbait and we think of panic porn when we go on, Twitter X and everything. It's in the financial media as well, right? It's in the financial media as well. So we would say, be patient, let things play out. I think things are moving in a great direction, and there's a lot of things at play in terms of national policy related to tariffs. It's not just about trade, and it's not just about deficits.
I mean, former member of Congress Matt Gaetz, and now he's a TV host, he tweeted today, he's like, listen, I'm not even in government. I've had a bunch of foreign countries come to me asking, can I help arrange a meeting with Donald Trump, because they're seeking relief. And you've seen Vietnam's come to the table. The EU has come to the table. Argentina said they want to be the first country to have zero tariffs. So I do think that the strategy appears to be working.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go the other way with Canada and say, well, we're going to put a 35% tariff on you guys' stuff. Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the majority of other people are not responding that way. And you heard Secretary Bessent say, we're focused on companies, not countries. And that's who they're trying to bring. They're trying to bring people here to manufacture things in this country. Again, that's the end goal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, we appreciate you as always taking the time to listen to this podcast. We hope we've made some sense of what is going on, perhaps things that you're not hearing that are going on behind the headlines. You can find out more about the research we do at thedrilldown.com. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are located. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.